Okay, so thank you for joining me today for I believe it's episode 20. Sam, I regularly get that wrong. I say it's episode 21 or episode 18, but it's definitely 20. I double checked this morning. So episode 20 of The Healthy Business Leader. So today I'm joined by Sam. He's the founder of Kurogo. I've been practicing that this morning. And he's going to give us a little insight into him and his business and kind of what Kurogo do.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Honored to be on episode 20, if it is episode 20. And yeah, as you rightly said, I run a company called Kurogo. We're a personal branding agency. So we work with founders, entrepreneurs, CEOs, and we help them build their audience, build their authority, and become thought leaders in their industry by building up their personal brand. So we've been running a little over 4 years now. We've worked with over 250 founders, everyone from early stage ventures that are just getting started through to senior leaders at the likes of KPMG, McKinsey, Salesforce, the big names. And yeah, I started it out of a university bedroom and our team of 15 working with some of the coolest people in the world. So my day job is pretty cool.
Amazing. I love that. So we're going to stick a pin in the kind of journey part, and we're going to chat about that in a little minute. But I think it'll be really helpful because I'm a bit older than you, and I'm sure there's people watching this that are kind of well, I know there's people watching this that are older than me, and personal branding can be a little bit of a what does that mean type thing. So if it's cool with you, could you just give us a bit of a kind of insight into what does that mean? Why is it so important nowadays compared to 10 years ago? And what can, this is a very loaded question, by the way, and what can someone do to start, the first kind of steps of building their own personal brand? That'd be great.
Yeah, so personal branding, it gets a bad rap, I think, a lot of the time because of a lot of people in the industry who don't really understand it. It's quite an easy industry to get into and say you're a personal brand expert because it has been a little bit vague previously. But for me, it's not about necessarily being an influencer or being a celebrity or becoming famous. It's just about framing the skills, expertise, experience, values, personality you already have in the best way possible. So a lot of the clients we speak to, a lot of the people we speak to, they're really, really good at what they do. They've got great business, they're experts in their industry. Clients are really, really happy, they're doing great work, but no one knows about it because they've not learned to talk about it in the right way, or they simply don't have the time or expertise to talk about it properly. So they almost don't get the credit they should. So we're not trying to fake anything or forge anything or be anything that we're not. We're literally just trying to, frame what we're already doing in the best way possible to build the right reputation. And that's really, really important because in 2025, it's the best way to connect with other people in business, to build your network, to build your customer base, maybe even attract investors, or just build a good kind of representation of you. Trust is at an all-time low at the moment. And actually, PwC have been studying trust for a long time. They do a study every year, and they've done it last 3 years this specific way. They interview business execs and they ask them how much they think their customers trust their company. And I think this year it was 90% of them said their customers highly trust their company, whereas only I think it's 30% of people actually do. So there's this big 60-point
Wow.
trust gap between how much people think customers trust their company and how much they actually do. And that's because, social media over the years, people have kind of they don't know who to trust anymore. And by building
Mm,
a brand online, by creating the right representation of yourself, you can build that trust with other people. And it's not new, right? Like 20 years ago, people were still using other humans to build trust, except you had to have $20 million in a 3-year campaign with David Beckham to do it.
yeah.
And you use David Beckham's face to build trust. Now, because you have platforms like LinkedIn at your fingertips, you can reach as many people, for free from the comfort of your own home without the $20 million ad budget.
So interesting. So a couple of bits I want to pick out from that then. So, you know, just going back to what is personal branding, right? So you mentioned David Beckham there, right? So kind of
Mm.
attaching yourself to this well-known celebrity, whether he's trusted, I'm not sure, but he's the celebrity, right? People look at him and go, right, must be good because David Beckham uses it, right? A bit like Stella Artois at the moment. It's like, okay, not sure he drinks beer, but anyway. Um, so, that kind of trust part, I suppose, from kind of understanding, there's like a new phase of this, which is kind of like PR and content marketing and that personal branding that just starts to kind of build that ecosystem. So just from your side then, how do those start to, because I know you're kind of doing a little bit of all of that, right? How does that kind of blend now compared to how it used to be 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Yeah. So, 10, 15, 20 years ago, you go to a David Beckham, you go to an influencer, you stick them on your ad campaign, and it's kind of reserved for the biggest brands. Worked really well back then. Not as effective now. It's still effective for some brands with the right kind of celebrity partnerships, but nowadays you don't necessarily need a celebrity or to be a celebrity to do this. Google did another study, actually. People might have heard this, the 7-11-4 rule, which is that people need 7 hours of interaction across 11 touch points and 4 locations to trust you. Right. So if they have that enough contact time with you, if they have that contact time with you, they will start to trust you and like you as a business. And personal brand is one way to do that. It sits really nicely alongside PR and content marketing. And these are all tools that we call amplification tools. So they're tools that you can use to amplify what you're doing to other people, to reach new people. So for example, if you're posting content on your personal LinkedIn profile, if you're making videos and podcasts and interviews like this, if you're featuring in industry press, those are all points where you can educate your audience, have touch points with them, and start to get them to trust you. And if you build up enough of those, you're going to put them in a position where they're ready to buy. Of course, it's got to be backed up by having a great business, having a great product, being an actual expert
Yeah.
in your industry, which is the thing that a lot of people miss, I think, right now. You've actually got to be the expert first because you're just amplifying whatever you've already got. Right. So if you're not an expert, you're just amplifying the fact that you're not an expert to lots of people, right? So
Mm,
you want to get the expertise nailed down first. And then you can use tools like content, like PR, like your personal brand to get that in front of more people. So, I mean, let's take you as an example, right? Posting content in LinkedIn is one way to build up those touch points with your audience. Having interviews like this is another way to get more contact time with your audience. And all of it really is just geared towards reaching more people, building trust with that pool of people that already knows who you are to the point where they're ready to buy from you. And that's all this exercise is.
mhm. Yeah, it's again, I'm 39 this year, so I kind of probably was the last generation that didn't have mobile phones growing up. At
Mm,
15, 16, they started to kind of come out, and obviously it was, you know, Snake on the phone when it first came out, and it just about made a phone
yeah.
call. And then over those kind of 5 years, it was Blackberries, and it was Apple, and things changed very quick. You know, my early 20s, I suppose. But I think looking at this as not a business owner, I think just as a person, um, I've deleted a lot of social media. I don't have any social media on my phone apart from LinkedIn. That's my main focus of the business, as you well know. I think there's so much information, there's so much stuff. I mean, for example, I use the example of Instagram, okay, specifically for my industry. You know as well as I do, if you spend 20 minutes on Instagram, you're probably going to see 20, maybe 30 personal trainers, fitness influencers, all this kind of stuff. And I suppose from my perspective as like a consumer, it becomes very, as you mentioned earlier, like it becomes very difficult to understand what is good information, what's bad information. And unfortunately, what can happen, as you've alluded to with what you said about you have to actually be good, is that some of these guys and girls are doing very well because they're good at content marketing, because they're good at attention grabbing. And one of the examples that I've used a few times, I spoke to Ash Rathod about this and kind of, being authentic and true to yourself. And one of the examples I use in my industry is how I'm not going to mention names, I won't go down that route, but how there's quite a few people now, maybe three or four, very well known kind of fitness people that are doing very well for themselves, but they've done it in a way where they have personally attacked other trainers, other people trying to do good, and they're doing that video in video thing where it's kind of, oh, look at this twat, what does he know? This is all nonsense. And I think, again, as a consumer, I would look at that and go, oh, well, he must know what he's doing because he's tearing this person down. And I just feel, as an individual, it just doesn't sit right with me. I just don't like that. I don't think you should build a reputation and a business on cutting other people down or being a bit of a dick, really. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that, the way you articulated that about, yes, it's great to amplify and make sure that, you're doing a great job of more people seeing you, more touch points. It always comes back down to how good are you, and how much kind of, when that person actually sits in front of you, either on a camera or in a coffee shop or in a bar or whatever, are you the same person that they saw on the screen,
Yeah.
right? So I don't think it's a question. I think it's just a point just to throw back to you and get your take on it, really.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, to be honest. Like there are a lot of people doing that. I think long term they'll get found out. And for me, the other thing, right, is there's always going to be a group of people that resonate with you if you're natural to how you actually are, right? Like for me, I would never work with a personal trainer that's like bashing someone else online because I'm like, that's just personality wise, that's just not a good look. That's not the kind of
Mm,
person I want to work with. And there will be hundreds of thousands of people that have the exact same mindset as me. And I guess you can apply that to any industry, right? There's always going to be a subsection of the audience that wants to work with you just because they relate to you, your personality, how you go about things. So
mm.
whilst there might be loads of people maybe doing it the wrong way, personally, I believe if you do it the right way and in a way that's kind of authentic and natural to you, there's going to be a subsection of your audience that love that, right? And they'll be your true fans. They'll be the ones that buy. Ultimately, you probably only need couple of hundred, thousand of them to buy in your whole lifetime to have a very successful business and make a huge
Yeah.
impact, right? You don't necessarily need to be reaching 2 million people on Instagram in order to do it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It kind of depends on your model as well, right? I mean, with what we do, it's all one-to-one premium. It's all about kind of that really personal experience. Whereas the people I'm talking about, it's all about low level calorie counting
It's
apps for
$27
$4.99.
PDF that they're selling, right?
Yeah, get them in quick, just get them in, get them out kind of stuff. And it just as a person, it just doesn't sit. I've been down that kind of route and tried it. It just didn't sit right with me. So, I think it's LinkedIn and the longer game for me makes a lot of sense, even though it could be quite frustrating. As I know you're very aware, but I suppose kind of like a question from my side: if there's a 52-year-old entrepreneur, and I've got a couple of my clients in mind here, and they're done really well for themselves. They're launching a new business and they're going for their second shot. And it's not like they don't need to make the money. It's more of a, I want to do this again. I want to do this in a different way. I want to make an impact, right? And they're looking at and going, right, I'm 52 years of age. I've never been on camera. I've never written an article. I've never really posted online. But I know now this is the new landscape that I now need to look at. So what would you say from your perspective? I know it's difficult to be specific, but if there was three things they can do over the next 6 months with regard to content marketing and positioning, what would those three things be?
Yeah, so number one thing is work out what you actually want to be known for. So what you want people to think about you when you walk into a room, the kinds of topics that you want to be seen as an expert in and why you're credible. If you're 52 and you've already exited a business or you've been in your industry for 20, 30 years, you've got a lot of interesting things to say. You are most
Yeah,
likely an expert and people want to hear that. I think a lot of people think, people are really interested in hearing from me. Absolutely, they definitely are. Especially if you've got that much experience. Right now, there's people with probably 30 years less experience that are getting a lot of traction and people are still interested in what they have to say. So if you've been in the game for a long time, I think people are even more interested. So the first thing I'd work out is, what is that interesting thing? Why would people listen to me? What do I want to be known for? Because that's going to give you a really clear picture of where you're going. And it's going to save you from doing things that aren't authentic, that don't feel natural to you because you're just chasing like views or engagement or whatever. So this is going to keep you really honed in on where you actually need to go. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing I do is pick a social media channel that works for you and where your audience are. For the majority of people listening, I imagine LinkedIn is probably going to be a good choice, but
mhm.
it might be Instagram, it might be TikTok. It depends on you and your audience. But just pick one at the start. You don't have to be doing everything. And if your audience are 40 to 50-year-old business owners, go to LinkedIn. Don't be doing loads and loads of TikToks right at the start. So pick one channel and just start producing content on that channel. Share value, share your advice, share insights, opinions, and start building up an audience on one specific channel first. Um, you can always move into other social channels later down the line. If you do that straight away, though, you're going to get overwhelmed. You're going to get bored of the platforms that don't suit you. It's just
I've been
not going
down
to
that
work.
road,
So pick one.
done that one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Pick one, nail it, and then
yeah.
diversify later on if you want to. Um, and then the final thing I would actually look to do is look for partners to create like more content with. So basically media partners, right? Things like this is a great example because give people a little inside peek on the strategy behind things like this, right? We both have some overlap in our audience. There are some sections of our audience, not a complete overlap, but there are some sections in both our audiences that are the same people interested in the same things, right? And by us creating a piece of content like this, we both help each other because you get access to some of my audience that might see it, and I get access to some of your audience that might see it. And both of them win because they're getting value out of it. So I would look for partners that have maybe complementary businesses or complementary audiences. That could be other people online that are posting. It could be podcasts. It could be media outlets. It could be press. These people have already built up an audience of the type of people you want to reach. So collaborate with them to create content that they can distribute to their audience as well. So those are three things. Work out what you want to be known for, start producing content on one channel, and then look for partners that can distribute you to their audience.
Superb, superb. I think the trying to do it all at once. One was definitely me, kind of probably 4 years ago, because we got bought into the whole kind of Grant Cardone type thing, which is like more, 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 which is great. But then you start to produce stuff that's a bit shit, and it's a bit,
Yeah.
it's great to say that when you've got someone following around with a camera 24 hours a day that's just pumping out video. So I think if anyone's going to take anything from this, what you've just said there about choosing a channel, for me personally, I've experienced the benefit of just going, right, this is the channel that I'm going to choose. I'm just going to keep doing it and keep learning and keep refining until I get really good at it. Because, again, in my experience, I've had a habit of kind of, I think entrepreneurs do it. They bip and bop from different things, right?
Yeah.
And you never really get great at something. You just kind of do okay, and you don't get results and think, why did that happen? It's well because you haven't done enough. You've only posted
Yeah.
post 1,000 times just to get half decent at it. So I think that's a really good point that you made. I'm going to just kind of switch gears a little bit now and talk about you. And I want to kind of start with something that happened fairly recently, not back in the day, but the Sky News interview, which I know you kind of shared on your profile. So I mean,
Yeah.
looking at that from the outside in, as personal brand, all the things you just spoke about. If I didn't, I do know you personally, obviously, but if I didn't know you personally, I'd look at that and go, wow, that's Sky News. That's a real great example of you attaching yourself to this kind of higher status news outlet, and people go, "Wow, Sam was on kind of the Sky News." So I suppose what I'm kind of want you to talk about a little bit is talk about that kind of Sky News. Give us a bit of an insight into that. How did that happen? How did that feel? And then tell us a bit about kind of the journey of how you got from university, starting on your desk in university to kind of where you are, really.
Yeah, so the Sky News feature came about. We're actually working with a PR partner of ours. So we have a number of partners in the business that we use ourselves and work with on our clients. And that came about through a partner of ours who were doing a little bit of work for me, and they had a contact at Sky News. And we crafted a kind of angle that we thought would be interesting to that publication specifically. Obviously, Sky News is a pretty enormous media outlet, right? Lots of people consume the news. Lots of people will know Sky if you mention it, and they see it as quite a credible source of information. So it's obviously a big one to land. We had a few smaller ones before that, but I guess I'll give the credit to the PR team for nailing the story and everything there. The experience was interesting, right? I they don't send any prep. They don't tell you what they're going to ask you. You're in a green room 15 minutes before, 10, 15 minutes before. And then they're like, three, two, one, you're live, and they just jump in. And I was not expecting some of the questions that came through. So you got to be able to think on your feet a little bit. Um, but it was, I thought it went reasonably well. I wouldn't say I was prepped for all of the questions. I didn't expect some of them, but hopefully I handled it well. And off the back of it, I think maybe four or five people watched it live on the telly and then reached out off the back of it. But then it's when I shared it on social, just floods of people saying like, this is awesome. Loads of people, loads of new leads coming in. And still to this day, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I actually did the recording now. Still to this day, we have people come through saying, saw the Sky News interview. So it's just like a big stamp of credibility. and separates you from a lot of the industry, right?
Straight
I don't
away,
want to
yeah,
bash the industry. There are a few
yeah.
people in the industry that would have done really well in a similar situation, but there are a lot of people in the industry that maybe wouldn't know personal branding well enough to handle that sort of situation. So I
Was it
think
Boris
that's one of
Johnson,
the big
Sam? Is that
benefits.
right? Was it Boris Johnson at the time? Have I got that right?
They asked about, I think they asked about how I would rebrand Boris
That's
Johnson
it,
was
because
one of the
he's been through the
questions.
whole. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, so it was Ian King interviewing me, asked about Tesco CEO, asked about Boris Johnson. They're quite high level questions, right? Which you can kind of expect given the audience that would be listening or viewing Sky News. So yeah, it's a great differentiator, great kind of stamp of credibility. If you're on
Yeah.
Sky, people kind of trust you a little bit more.
I'm going to ask you two questions now, and they've popped into my head, right? So, first one was, I know the answer is already, but were you nervous? And the second part of that question is, did you feel that opportunity came to you and you felt, am I kind of ready for this part? So a little bit of that imposter syndrome type thing.
Mm. I'd say I was like a confident nervous, if that makes sense. I knew my stuff. Like I knew I could deliver. It's just the stakes are a lot higher. If you
Yeah,
asked me the same questions or had the same experience in a very casual scenario, it's like I probably wouldn't have thought twice about it. It would have been very, very simple.
yeah,
But this is your 5 minutes on Sky News and lots of people are going to see it. And it's live. You haven't, if you mess up, you haven't got a chance to redo it.
yeah,
Thousands of people
yeah,
have already seen it. So the
yeah.
stakes were definitely a lot higher. I don't think I was necessarily ready for those stakes. So I think that's where maybe some of the nerves came in. But I felt confident that I knew my stuff and I knew I was going to be able to answer pretty much
Mm,
any question that was thrown at me.
mm. So if it would have been, someone you spoke about, the personal branders that are just jumping on a trend, they're probably going to crumble, right? It's going to be a bit of
Yeah,
a shit show,
exactly.
essentially. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and yeah, I guess if you're not nervous, you just gotta if you're not confident, sorry, you just gotta act like you are anyway. So there was a
Yeah, I
bit
know
of
we,
that in
we call
there.
it blagging, right? It's a bit of a blag. It's kind of, there's been
Yeah.
situations where, personally for me, I've been in rooms with people and you're like, okay, these are serious people. Can I be here? Do I belong here? And the more you kind of do it, probably same for you, the more you do it, the more you talk to those types of people, you just become a little bit more okay with it. And I think, what works for me, and I've never done Sky News, but what works for me when I'm in a room of people that, you know, are much higher in the chain of business and stuff like that, financially doing very well for themselves. I think it's just that kind of moment of like, no, I deserve to be here. I've been invited to be here. They wouldn't have invited me if I'm not ready to, do what
So
I've got to do. And you know yourself, right? With business, it's about you need to get, excuse me, into the next room. The next room is the one that's slightly higher, and it's slightly higher. And unless you're willing to put yourself in those uncomfortable situations, which you very much did with Sky News, like you could have said no, right? You could have said, I can't
yeah.
do that. But it's getting into that kind of the next part and the next part. So I'm just going to again switch gears slightly and talk a bit about your journey as an entrepreneur, because I do really make an effort on this podcast to talk about that, because as an entrepreneur, we're both in the same boat, right? It's the up and down nature, the stress of running a team, the VAT bills and the paying members of staff and clients leave and all that stuff. You get it, right? So, do you want to just give us a bit of a kind of insight into your journey, any little bits of kind of, bits of information you think would be helpful for people watching as well would be great.
Yeah, so I guess I got into entrepreneurship at uni, right? So in between studying and playing football and obviously drinking a fair bit, I was trying to get all sorts of freelance marketing projects. And depending on who I speak to, I say that's either because I was trying to develop my career or I was trying to get extra beer money. So it was truthfully a little bit of both.
Yeah,
And I went to all these events. I would be like reaching out to business owners in the local area, I'd be sending emails, and I was always met with the same response, which was, "Who the fuck are you?" Right? You're
yeah,
just this
yeah. Who are you?
19-year-old kid.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I get it, right? Like I totally get it. I was pretty young, but I knew somewhat about marketing. Like I knew more than these local business owners at least. And I wasn't, I was only doing kind of light services. There was nothing major. Um, but I really struggled to actually get any projects through. So as a last resort, I thought, right, what's the most businessy place I know? Where are business owners hanging out? Obviously went to LinkedIn. I started just posting content on LinkedIn. Literally, as I was learning things, as I was finding new things out or testing things, I would just share it.
How
And
long
I
ago
did
was this,
that for
Sam? Sorry,
probably,
man. When did you first post on
this
LinkedIn?
was probably 2019, I think. I
So 6
first
years ago.
started.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And I did that for maybe a year or so whilst I was finishing up uni. And throughout that time, I started getting a few people reach out saying, hey, look, I've seen you posting content, would love it if you could help me with my profile, which I wasn't really looking for that kind of project. I was looking for like videography and content, blog writing, and all this other stuff. But people started reaching out for help with their LinkedIn. So I kind of coached, consulted a few people. I remember the first person that reached out saying, like, can you help with my profile? And I was like, yeah. How much is it? And I was like, 200. Just plucked a number out of thin air, 250 quid or something for a few consulting sessions. And
They
that was
paid
my
though,
first
right? They
client.
they paid, yeah.
Paid.
Good, good, good.
And I guess that's a really important kind of turning point, is the first client that actually pays for your knowledge. I was like, oh wow, there's actually something here, right? And over the next year or so, whilst I was finishing my studies, I realized that this personal branding thing was a thing. So graduated 2020. So we all know what happened then. Kind of had this, it felt like a bit of a free shot just to give it a go. And I was actually, so I'd moved out of uni. I was staying in my girlfriend's spare uni bedroom at the time. And I couldn't stay there forever. Didn't want to go home. So I found a place. This is in Oxford now. I found a place in Oxford. I realized I could afford the rent for 6 months. So I was like, right, 6 months, I'm going to move to this place and I'm going to give this a go. And if it doesn't work out, I get a job. And in those 6 months, I've signed my first like actual agency client, grew very quickly to the point where I was then bringing on people to help with the work because I had so many clients by the end of that 6 months. So I think that kind of 6 month period, which was at the turn of, it was 2020, 2021, at the turn of the year, that kind of period was so important. I think a few things helped. First is just having that like hard deadline of, right, if you don't make this, you're going to go and get a job. There's something at
Yeah.
stake here. And the other thing was actually just being in a new city where I knew my girlfriend, and that was it. Like I didn't have
Yeah.
any friends there. Most of my mates were actually still at uni. There was no distractions. Probably the healthiest I've ever been in terms of diet, exercise, doing a lot of football at the time. And I was just so focused for 6 months. And I can safely say that 6 month period probably changed my life.
Would you say that the COVID was a benefit to you compared to if it would have been pre-COVID or
Do you know what? It feels bad to say, but yes, because more people
yeah.
were realizing the importance of being online. So there was an
Hmm.
element of being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
People realized they needed, couldn't go to networking events anymore. So they needed to kind of replicate the same effect online. So I
Mm.
think I think that did help, truthfully. A lot of people, I signed a lot of my first few clients like in that period.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it did, to be truthful. So yeah, signed my first few clients over that year. I was bringing on my first few hires kind of part-time, just ad hoc in 2021. But then by the end of 2021, I'd had a few people join full-time working in the business. That was my first kind of major challenge, I think, was hiring the first few people. We had a few of them leave one after the other as well. So you're left with, suddenly you got like 20 clients and no one to do it with. You're pulling ridiculous hours just to get the content done. Um, your your people have left. You've got to find new people. That's probably the first big challenge that we had. Um, and obviously loads more since.
Just so I got this right then, so you kind of grew through COVID, then COVID ends, and then obviously we had the similar experience, right? So what I noticed was that post COVID, nothing really changed, but about 6 months in, maybe something like that, people started to go back into the offices. So you had the challenge of the getting staff and them leaving and stuff like that. And then I guess you had the challenge of people getting back into the office. Did you notice anything within the business or not particularly?
Not a lot. So we've always been remote. So we're fully remote. Which actually I think a lot of people want nowadays. So even though there are still a lot of companies going back into the office, I think we have a bit of a pull of still being a fully remote team.
Hmm.
So I think that's quite good for attracting talent. I don't think it's actually affected the client side of things too much with people going back in. I think the demand has been fairly stable. At least I don't think it's necessarily been affected. Um, by that. But yeah, I think actually being remote, even though people are going back to the office, has been a bit of a pull for us because we get the best talent wherever it is, right? And
Yeah.
we've got writers across Europe, Asia, we've had people in the States, and we're not bound to like if you're not in London, you can't work for us. You know, if the best talent's in Manchester, we'll hire them, which has been quite a good thing for us. I think it fits with our model nicely.
So you're fully remote, and then when you do your consultation calls, everything's done via Zoom, right?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Have you
So
ever been tempted to get yourself an office, or never really been
we
bothered?
had a
Or
studio for a little while. So we got a content studio in central London, which we had for 2 years or so. We've actually just moved out of it. But we got it to produce content and it was useful for that, but I don't think we used it enough. You know, I was half expecting the team, we've got maybe 5 or 6 people in London. I was expecting the more local team to go in and use it a lot more. I was expecting to have clients in every single week. I was expecting to have loads of video shoots going on, but
yeah,
we probably didn't market it well enough. We didn't advertise it well enough. We didn't promote
yeah,
it enough to the team. And actually, I mean, that's one thing that hasn't worked out in the business, right? Like that didn't take off the way we expected it to, and we got to a point where we're like, you know, we're spending a salary on this office, and we're using it once every 2 weeks, and it just
mm,
wasn't worth it, to be honest. So we went back to fully remote.
yeah. It's got real benefits, and the fact that you're not paying. I mean, we've been down both routes, right? But paying thousands of pounds each month for something you're not really using is quite it's
Yeah,
quite upsetting, isn't it? So,
yeah.
just from your side, then, with your career as a business owner, what would you say has been your biggest kind of win, or your biggest high for you?
Do you know what? It was probably the first few clients in that first 6 month period. We signed one and they paid like I think they were 300 quid a month they paid, which looking back now, it was like as an absolute bargain. I think if I was still selling at 300 quid a month, I don't think I'd struggle to sign clients. It might not be very profitable with a team,
Yeah,
but yeah, having that and then they were speaking about me online, like they were saying, I think they did a post saying how I'd helped them, and off the back of that, I had 4 or 5 clients. And very quickly, I went from signing that £300 a month client to 3 or 4 more, and then I signed a £2,000 a month client, which at the time was just like, this is insane. Like I didn't think this was possible, and it was an eye opener, right? Because it showed me what was possible. You know, it kind of broke a few belief systems, helped me build up my confidence that people would be willing to pay substantial fees to kind of have me help them.
mm,
That client stuck around for over 2 years. One of the best clients we've ever had a great relationship with them. So I think that was, whilst it was very early on, and you know, signing a it's, there's no way of saying this without it sounding arrogant, but signing a 2K a month client now is kind of not a huge thing in the agency. But at the time, because of where I was, it was such a big turning point and just opened my mind to what was possible. So I definitely think that was the biggest. Getting the team together as well is another big one. So for the last 2 years or so, we've done 2 in-person team meets a year because we're remote. We don't get to see each
yeah,
other in person. So in the summer and at Christmas, we all get together for a couple of days. We get team all to the same place, and just the last few seeing a whole team going, wow, this is like I've built this. This team has come out of me in my girlfriend's spare uni bedroom. That's a real moment of like, okay, we've actually built something quite significant here.
yeah.
So I'd say those two are probably the biggest things.
Good for you, mate. And what's the biggest low?
How long have we got?
How long you got?
Toughest moments. I mean, having 2 team members leave in the space of a few weeks, not in the best way possible, was a real challenge, especially in the early days when I'd never experienced that before. And having to kind of take on the bulk of that work. At the start of, I think it was 2022, I lost a third of my business in a week. In the first week of January, coming back after Christmas, I lost a third of the business in a week because people just reevaluating budgets. At that point, I was like, right, I'm ready to quit. But I'd actually already offered someone a job, and they'd handed their notice in their current place. They were joining in 2 weeks, which is Jake, now our head of client services. He's been with us years, and because I'd offered him a job, that was the only reason I kept going. I was like, this guy's joining, I can't just quit the business now. Um, so that was probably the most challenging. The last 2 years have been tough. I think they've been tough for everyone in business. Just going through months where, you're not paying yourself, people aren't buying like they used to. You start to question yourself because it used to work, but now it's not. You're starting to think, did I just get lucky? What was it about the first 2 years? And when it's kind of entrepreneurship is just like getting punched in the face over and over and over again, isn't it? Whilst you're trying to climb a mountain. So I think it's maybe if it's not one moment, it's just dealing with that constantly.
It's I'm certainly not one of those people. I'm sure you're the same, to go down the whole kind of pity party route. It's not what entrepreneurs do generally, not successful ones anyway. But I think, we're not going to go too deep into this, and don't get stressed out. But I think from an economy standpoint, I've noticed I've never been really someone to go, the economy's doing this and the economy's doing that. It's always been, well, no, let's just do more, let's change what we're doing, let's diversify, let's do this. That's what entrepreneurs do, right? But I think, I'm hearing it from a lot of my clients, people that have got 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 members of staff, right? And the recent changes has really put a lot of pressure on businesses in general, because it's costing them more to have staff,
Mm.
and that then needs to be passed on to someone, which is generally going to be the client, or they're going to get rid of some staff. So I think it's not just you, mate. I think the economy really has had an impact on business in general. And then those entrepreneurs that had or have all the money, they've still got a bank full of money, but they're going, I don't even want to spend it at the moment, because if A, B, and C happens over here, then I'm in trouble. So I think it's just, over the last couple of years, I've kind of become a little bit more observant of what's going on. But at the same time, same as you, it's never going to stop me moving forward. It's just that maybe at the moment it's through custard rather than, on roller skates. Does that
That's
make
it,
sense?
right? Yeah, 100%. You can't, it's extremely difficult to control that, right? In fact, you probably can't control it. I think you can only control the things that you do every day. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, it's not in an entrepreneur's nature to wake up and complain. You just get it right. It is what it is. Get on with it. Take a bit of responsibility for yourself.
You did an amazing segue for me there, which is I really appreciate. I don't know if you did that on purpose, but you then spoke about taking control over the things you can control, right? Because again, as an entrepreneur, everything's on your shoulders. So if stuff goes wrong, you're getting the phone call. If the client goes, it's all on your shoulders, right? So it's a lot of stress. There's a lot of sometimes panic. There's a lot of kind of constant pressure. Even when things are really good, you're still a bit like, okay, well, what's coming down the road, right? So I totally get it. So I think what you just said there about controlling the controllables is really, really important. Now I'm going to switch gears into more of the health side of things now. And obviously, with what we do, we work specifically with entrepreneurs. Say 90% of our clients are running businesses, and kind of understanding how to, use health and training and nutrition and sleep, all the good stuff, as a way to not only make yourself feel good and improve your health, but also the impact that has on your business and your clarity and your focus and stuff like that. Now, obviously, I bang this drum every single day relentlessly, but I think you're a great example of somebody that does control the controls. I know you train stuff like that. So could you give us a bit of an insight for any business owners that watch this, maybe even executives as well that are super busy? What benefits do you get from controlling the controllables, i.e., training, nutrition, sleep? And kind of how do you fit that into a busy life like you have?
Yeah. Well, the number one thing is I just feel better every day. I'm happier. I feel better. Life is just so much better when you're training and you're taking care of your health. I think it's the ultimate form of self-respect is to make yourself feel good by exercising, right? So that's like the overall thing. But also I think for me, right, the number one thing that determines how successful me and my business is going to be is how efficient and productive and effective I personally am. Like I am the number one factor in determining even down to like how much I earn next month. It's on me because I can control that, right? So if I'm performing at my peak, if I'm productive, if I'm healthy, if I've got clarity, if I'm eating the right kind of diet to fuel my body, if I'm getting the right exercise to give me energy, clear my mind, I'm going to work 10 times more effectively, more efficiently, get better quality work done. and my quality of life is going to improve directly as a result of it. So like right now, just the fact that I am the biggest difference between what I earn this month and what I earn next month, it just makes sense for the vehicle, which is me, to be performing well, right? It's kind of like an F1 car, right? If you were trying to win an F1 race, you build the best possible car. It's the same with you, right? You're the vehicle. So that's a big thing for me. But also I want to play this game of business for the next 30, 40, 50 years. And I want to be 40, 50, operating like I'm 30, having the body and mind of a 30-year-old. Because again, I know that if I can just extend the window of me performing at my peak, again, I'm going to be able to achieve more in business and in my life. So, I don't want to get to 40 with the mind and body of a 60-year-old. I want to still be competing and operating at the same level that most people would at 25, 30. So there's kind of a longevity game with it. I think if you can just extend the years that you're operating at your peak, it opens up so many more opportunities and possibilities for things you can do. And I don't think it has to be complicated either. Like I I have a fairly simple routine. I don't have a 9-step morning routine. In fact, in the mornings, I just do a few things. I wake up, I drink water, I hydrate, and I try not to drink caffeine for the first hour. Like
Yeah.
it's really simple. I try and train 6 times a week, and I mix up. I do different sorts of training. So I'll do weight training, I'll do cardio, I'll do functional stuff. I'll do hits. So I mix up my training a lot. And I eat probably 80% good diet. 80% of the food that goes in is natural, healthy, whole foods. 20% of it, I'll treat myself. There's no harm in doing that. I'll go out for a meal or whatever. That's absolutely fine. I don't think you need to be so strict and only eat, steak and eggs off a chopping board, like some people will tell you. So yeah, I think habits wise, I keep it quite simple.
Let me just kind of ask a very specific question then. So if let's flash back to the Sky News interview, and you've been given the opportunity, and instead of working out and eating right, the 2 days before that you'd been out with clients and you'd had 4 bottles of wine and you'd had chips and you had a fry up and you hadn't worked out for 2 days. How do you think that would have affected your mindset, your performance, and your ability to actually perform on that interview?
Probably wouldn't have been able to think on my feet as I needed to, right? There were questions I weren't expecting, and I probably wouldn't have come up with answers or articulated myself as well as I wanted to if I wasn't in a good state to perform, right? And we say that it seems like a small detail, but actually the knock-on effects that can have are pretty enormous, right? So yeah, thank God I wasn't.
Do you know what? I'm asking that as a little bit of a kind of introduction to a bit of a concept, which is what blows my mind all the time, right? Is how you get, and I speak to lots of these people. This is not like I'm just making this up. I speak to lots of people that are extremely successful. We're talking multi millionaires, and they have the most terrible health you can imagine. And I sit there thinking, right, how did you get to where you are when you've been drinking, you've been probably having fags on the weekend in the pub with your mates, you're hardly sleeping, you're caffeinated, you're traveling all the time, you're jet lagged, you're just treating your body like a dustbin. And I look at them and think, imagine if you'd have looked after yourself, what you would have been able to do. It blows my mind. I think like you've probably been operating at 40% your whole life, and here you are, you know, one of the most successful people I've ever met. It just blows my mind. I think, I talk a lot about health and wealth. It's kind of this concept around, a lot of the clients we work with, they've got the wealth. That's done. They've got a t-shirt. They can buy whatever they want. They haven't really got to work. That's done. But the real big bit that's missing is the health part, and they've never really matched it together. They've never really understood the importance of both of them. But unfortunately, what happens a lot of these guys and girls is they do get to 50, and suddenly all those kind of health issues start to come out in their body. The doctor's saying you need to go on medication, or you're having a heart problem. So the whole kind of concept around health and wealth is that you can have all of it. You can have the health, you can have the wealth. And in my experience, you've got both those things. The relationships have a habit of kind of, being better anyway. So I think a new wave of business owners, which I would hope you don't mind put you in that kind of pigeonhole, you know, you understand the benefits of working out, you understand the benefits of sleeping, you understand the benefits of giving yourself some space. I think the whole business landscape is changing. And I'd say probably the UK and America is not the top of that trend, the front of that trend. I think there's in some industries like tech are really into that, brain breaks and sleep pods, stuff like that. So I suppose what I'm trying to get at is that I'm looking at business owners at this end of the spectrum. Have you seen within your kind of, your bracket of age, I mean, your bracket of business owner, have you noticed there's a much more kind of, emphasis on fitness and health as part of the business journey?
1000%.
Right.
Probably, I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of any other business owners I know that are within 5 or 10 years age range of me that aren't really focused on their health. Every
Wow.
single one I can think of off the top of my head. Um,
Wow.
I, I can confidently say it's going to be 90+% of these people are really
Wow.
focused on their health and well-being. Um,
Wow.
which is, yeah, it's compare that to, I guess, a few generations above, it's probably much smaller. I think that's partly cultural as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
obviously 30, 40 years ago, if you're just starting out in business, it's probably the culture was very different. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, I think, back then, going to the pub all weekend and drinking with your mates and whatnot, that was like the done thing. That was cool. That was what like popular people did, right? But I feel like now the culture is actually shifting amongst my generation, and the cool thing to do, so to speak, is to be in good condition, is to keep fit, is to go to the gym, is to run marathons and whatever. So I think there's definitely been a cultural shift.
Would you say that's down? And I'm just picking something out of the air here, and this is just a bit of an assumption from my side. Would you put some of that down to Instagram and the fitness influencers and how it's become very trendy to look good?
I think so. I think so. I think it's especially for the entrepreneurs, I know it goes deeper than just looking good, right? Which is obviously one indication that you're taking care of yourself. But I think also there's a big recognition of just performing better, feeling better,
Yeah.
thinking more clearly. So I think it
Hmm.
can go deeper than just looking good. But so, I mean, you look at even business owners of the modern day, right? The types of business owners that me and my generation look up to or know about are all getting in good shape. Even
Or
if you look at
Moses, for example,
Mosey,
Gary
for
Vee's got
example,
his, yeah.
there you go. You even think about Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. If you compare their physique today to 20 years ago, drastically different. You can even
And
see that
Bezos,
those people have put, and Bezos,
Jeff
yeah,
Bezos,
you
yeah.
can see that
Yeah.
those people have put a massive emphasis on it. And I think that is, if the most, I guess they're some of the most successful, undeniably, and high profile entrepreneurs, if they're doing it, it's going to trickle down to other people.
Mm. Yeah, it's really interesting because I think it's people are, I mean, don't think generally are people in the UK looking after themselves. All the data would tell us no, because they've never been fatter, they've never been in poorer health. But using entrepreneurs as a real kind of subset of, society, I would say that I would agree with you from what you've said about the observations you've made. My observation is that some of the guys up this end, the ones that have been in the game for 20, 25 years, either are completely ignoring it and going, right, that's all bollocks. It doesn't matter. I'm still Gordon Gecko. I'm still Philip Green. That's my archetype. And it's or you've got the other end of it going, wow, like these young guys, they're coming up and they're fit and they're strong and they're on it. I need to get myself in shape. And I think it's real kind of like a real 50-50 split that's going on at the moment
Mm.
where some are going, no, this is what I do. And I'll give you an example, right? The insurance industry, which is what we're very busy in the insurance industry in the city. You can walk through Liverpool Lime Street any day of the week around lunchtime, and the pubs are packed out, but they're still packed out. But generally, they're not going to be people that are 20 or 21, 22. So I've got a feeling that even those really archaic industries, as the time goes past, it will change because you'll have people like yourself that are coming up going, I don't want to do all that stuff. I can go to meet a client and not drink 10 pints. I can go to a networking event and not drink 2 bottles of wine. So I think it's a really interesting space, a very interesting time for me within my industry because I see kind of both ends of it. And obviously, I want people to be more Sam Wingsbury than I do Philip Green, right? So kind of yeah, it's just an interesting kind of time and interesting to have a chat with you because you're seeing that in your world as well, you know.
Yeah, and to be honest, I know two people in insurance who have said exactly that, literally in the last couple of weeks. You know,
Really,
they're
yeah.
like,
Okay.
they're like, gee, the culture is mental. Like, I don't want to be doing 4 pints every
Mm,
lunch every weekday.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, I think you're right. It is changing. No, there'll be a subsection of the older generation that, are still maybe they're still running a business at 60, 70. Maybe they can actually watch their grandkids grow up. And there'll be a subsection that can't because they've not taken care of their health properly. So I
Mm.
guess it's a bit gloomy, but it's the reality of it, right?
It's where we're at. It's where we're at. You know, I talk about all the time. You know, especially in the UK, that they projected in the next kind of 25 years will be in the top five globally for obesity. Like it's getting worse and worse. So, you know, I think again, I'm going to give myself a little shout out on what we do over here. But I think from my perspective, what will really have an impact on the obesity epidemic in this country specifically, I can't comment everywhere else, but is business owners have a real big impact on so many people. Because, for example, me and you are sharing content, we're talking to a lot of people. When we, a bit different for me because I'm in health and fitness space, but when you get in shape or someone in insurance gets in shape, the boss gets in shape, the senior team start to see it and they start to do it. And then the culture starts to shift. And then middle management say, oh, well, John, the CEO, is in, maybe I should do it. So then you see this whole kind of cultural shift. And then what happens is that it passes to the families, then to the kids. So the impact that business owners actually have when they look after their health is so big. You know, if you imagine a guy that's got 100 members of staff and suddenly goes, right, from the
Mm.
1st of September this year, I'm going to lose 40 kilos and I'm going to get myself out moving and doing exercise. And instead of doing our summer party at the pub this year, we're going to do something cool like a whitewater raft and then we're going to have food after. Like that is so impactful because those 100 people that work for you all know 10 people within their family. That's it's a lot of
Mm.
people.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think the kind of the reason I'm talking about it is because I think that the impact that that can have on society in general is absolutely huge. But just from my side, for you, keep doing what you're doing, mate, because it has a big impact on everyone you talk to and everyone in your team. So you keep cracking on, mate. You're doing a great job.
Appreciate it. Will do, mate. And likewise, love the work that you're doing. So credit to you.
Thanks, Sam. Well, look, we're going to wrap up now because we've probably got both got things to do. But I appreciate you spending a bit of time with me today. Just quickly before we nip off, could you give me a quick kind of exit on how people can message you, how people can get in contact with you?
Yeah, so best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm Sam G. Wingsbury on LinkedIn. And if you go onto my profile in the featured section, there's a few resources that will give you a bit more of a flavor of the work we do. You can always just DM me on LinkedIn if you've got any questions.
Superb. And likewise for me, if you're a business owner, you're struggling with your health, struggling to get workouts in, struggling to get your weight down, you don't know where to start, message me and we can have a brief conversation and get you started. But thanks again, Sam.
My pleasure. Thanks, Chris.